Hello, everyone. This is the green flag here at the Darlington Post Race Show. The Goodyear 400 Throwback Weekend has finished, and William Byron has taken the number 24 car into victory lane for the 100th time. And as Joe put it so eloquently, wow, that was a hard word to say, to try to say something that meant like something nice. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. There was a race full of drama. There was a race full of accidents there at the end, comers and goers. What I thought was a wonderful, wonderful weekend to throw it back to NASCAR, the Lady in Black. But Joe, we've talked off air, and I agree with you 100%. It's taken me a while to come back around, but William Byron's third win means absolutely nothing for our sport, and more importantly, absolutely nothing from growing what was already a great race into, unfortunately, a very ending.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. That sums up my feeling of the race. But I'm going to talk a little bit on it. Yeah, William Byron gets his third win of the season. Absolutely nobody cares. The crowd didn't care. Usually when somebody wins a race, you see, a little bit of cheering, some, jumping up and down, loud screams from the crowd. I think we heard a golf clap somewhere in there. They gave him the flag. He cried like the little bitch that he is, and went over to victory lane. William Byron winning a race in this sport is about like Jimmy Johnson winning a race. He's not like nobody cares, and he has just a horrible personality. I mean, come on, the dude just won at Darlington, and he's crying when he gets out of his car. Now I understand emotion, but I don't know what he whimpered there. My mom couldn't make it or something of that nature.
Joe, can I slow you down a minute?
That's not.
Can I slow you down?
That's not what I want to talk about, though.
Can I slow you down? Why he cried?
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
Because you don't know why he cried. He lost his grandpa on Thursday.
Oh shit! Now I feel like a jackass.
That's why.
Oh god.
So
oh god.
I just want
to.
I don't want us to. I know you don't know that, and that's why I'm prefacing that, and that's why we're live, because we don't know these things. We're doing this immediately right after. So no, he wasn't just crying because he won the Darlington 500, but he did lose his grandpa.
Now I feel like a complete jackass.
He just lost his grandpa on Thursday, so his family's not there because of that.
Oh, I thought they said something about a graduation. Yeah. So anyway, I understand. And that's my fault. That's my bad.
He just let everybody know like 2 minutes ago. So, I think we're obviously, when you do this live, you're subjective to doing this without the littlest or the least amount of information. But moving forward, Joe,
I feel terrible.
Well, you kind of. He'd be not as bad as you felt when Ross Chastain put your man into the wall, right? Like what? Imagine what you said then. Imagine
today?
What you said. Yeah.
Today?
Yeah.
Well, Ross Chastain is becoming one of the biggest bitches in NASCAR. Are we allowed to say bitch?
Yeah, you're allowed. We're always talking about our dogs.
Yeah. Obviously Kyle Larson squeezed him on the caution before, and both of them kind of got into the wall there. So Ross Chastain says, "Hold my beer. Look at what I could do. I'll take us both out of the race." And by God, he did. And I'm sorry. I don't care. I know at this point, Truex fan 19 says hi. Just left a comment, but I know at this point, NASCAR needs that guy. They need a Kyle Busch. They need a Dale Earnhardt sort of guy. They need a villain. But I am so sick of week in and week out that the whole storyline is revolving around Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain had one of the best cars out there today. Kyle Larson had one of the best cars out there. Kyle Busch also had a really good car out there, but they can't get it right on pit road. So
Kyle can't get it right. Let's be fair. It was purely Kyle. That was his fault 100%.
And for Ross Chastain to race like that with 8 laps to go, taking both, he knew he had to know what the result of that was going to be. Yeah. Let's squeeze Kyle Larson and see if he'll let off. Kyle Larson's not going to let off in that situation. He didn't even let off after you ran him into the wall. And I got a little bit of enjoyment out of that, Kyle Larson said, you know what? I'm just going to gun it all the way around the track to ensure that you can't even come back out on the racetrack. So I enjoyed that a little bit, but Ross Chastain, I mean, my God, I do blame Kyle Larson a little bit in that situation though, because knowing who, Ross Chastain is, Kyle Larson probably should have took, the row 2 position right behind, Ross Chastain and got into the back of him. He probably would have set himself up for a little bit better, ending to the race there. Because Ross Chastain, it didn't matter if it was Kyle Larson. It didn't matter if it was Ross Chastain's grandma on the outside road. He was going to wreck somebody because that's how he races, because he's a complete and utter dumbass.
2 things I'll say here, Joe, and I'll disagree with you a little bit. Number one, when Kyle Larson set up Ross Chastain, he knew it was coming. Ross Chastain had ran a good race the entire day. Martin Truex Jr. actually took the mantle from Ross Chastain today and decided to start 2 wrecks. He wrecked himself trying to battle Ross Chastain, and then he pretty much caused the big one, wrecking into Joey Logano on that final or one of the restarts at the end. But when Kyle Larson squeezed Chastain to begin that restart as the chaos ensued behind them, you have to finish that, as in like Ross Chastain can't retaliate. And when you give Ross the door to retaliate, that happens. That being said, he ruined his race, and he was a fast car the entire day. There's no reason with Ross, who has not won a race this year, to set himself up to mean more to wreck Kyle Larson than it is for him to win the race. That's the part that I think that Ross has to grow. And we've had videos, we've talked about it. I think Ross Chastain is 100% in the heads of every single NASCAR driver, every single media member, and including the 2 of us. We've talked about him a ton, but where Ross Chastain could have grown, Joe, is by winning this race after already being in the heads of everybody else, but instead wrecks Kyle Larson, who was having a good race, to kind of say, hey, don't run me into the wall. That's why I still have a hard time saying that he can win a championship. And why I've talked to you about this is because I think he's a solid driver. He needs to take advantage whenever he's already into the head of others, but you can't wreck yourself to then do that. Dale Earnhardt didn't do that. Kyle Busch doesn't do that. All these villains, these whatever they would be, they make the most out of those situations. They make the most when Martin Truex Jr. tries to wreck you and Martin wrecks himself. Instead, Joe, like you said, he turned into a complete total idiot at the end, and he just ruins his entire race, all because he thought Kyle Larson ran him a little tight.
Yeah, I agree with everything, that you're saying. And what Ross Chastain should have done is, if that's last lap racing and you're doing that and you're trying to squeeze to stay in the lead on the last lap, I get it. But why are you doing that on a restart with 8 laps to go? That's just stupid.
When you have one of the fastest cars.
Yeah. And
can you hear me, Joe? Joe is paused on my screen, so if it takes him a minute to come back, I'll wait for you. This is what happens when we try. Can you hear me, Joe? You there, bud?
Yeah. What happened? Yeah,
you froze on my screen, but I can see you now. Are you good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I could actually see that in our live feed that I froze up there for a minute, but I think we're all good now.
Okay. Cool.
But what I was saying is Ross Chastain, obviously, he knew that Kyle Larson had a little bit better car than him. And I think he wanted to make it a point to stay out front. But here's my problem with all this, and this is kind of an elephant in the room to me, is I don't think Ross Chastain should have even been up front on that restart, because I think the restart before, he jumped the restart. And I think that they talked about that a little bit. And I think the replay pretty clearly shows that he jumped the restart on Kyle Larson, the prior restart, and probably should have been flagged for that. And he wasn't.
Yeah, I know we talked off air about that. I have not seen communication about that. I did not see anybody else make noise about that. The only thing I can guess is that, they assume Larson spun the tires or something of that nature to where he was allowed to cross first. But I mean, outside of that, speculation is all I can say.
Well, if Larson spun his tires and the entire rest of the field spun their tires as well, because of the shot that Ross Chastain got was the whole shot that he got was a pretty clear indication that he took off first, and that wasn't addressed. And I think NASCAR failed in that aspect. I don't even think Ross Chastain should have been running up front on the next restart, but it is what it is. It wasn't caught, or the penalty wasn't served, whatever you want to call it, and that's what we got. But like I said, at the end of the day, Ross Chastain is going to be Ross Chastain. I'm just tired of him being a major factor in why somebody else doesn't finish the race week in and week out.
I get that. I mean, he came into this race leading in points. I mean, outside of him hitting Kyle Larson, say the two of them run fairly, how would you feel about Ross Chastain winning this race compared to William Byron?
I think that would be, and that's a great question, Ryan. I mean, that's kind of a got you question. I think that does far more for the sport than William Byron winning the race. And, it's two different subjects.
I'm obviously throwing in the two, but we both know Ross Chastain isn't going to do that. He's not going to run somebody politely, if the right word. I'm not sure what the right word is. I watched the 2011 race from last night. They re-aired it, and it's just two different, completely different styles of racing. And William Byron wins this race. You mentioned it to me, and that's what we use. And I think a lot of NASCAR fans, a lot of the crowd goes, out of all the things we just witnessed for 400 laps, none of us care that William Byron just won this race.
And you're absolutely right, because Ross Chastain wrecks Kyle Larson and wins this race. We're having a completely different conversation right now. And so is probably the majority of the NASCAR fandom right now is completely pissed off. And then Ross Chastain fans are obviously happy. Right now what we have is a major incident that happens on the track, takes out the two fastest cars in the race because of Ross Chastain. William Byron ends up winning, and I don't think, there's not a ton of William Byron fans out there. I don't think anybody cares. I mean, I don't care. At the end of the day, when William Byron wins a race, it's kind of about as anticlimactic as it can get. Yeah, the kid's a good race car driver. He's in good equipment.
The funny thing, Joe, about when William Byron wins, and it's taken me a while to get to your point. At one point, I think I even pushed back against you. I was like, well, what if he's growing and, he's finding his spot and becomes a dominant driver? And I think the best thing you can allude him to or compare him to, at least when it comes to how he is on the track and how he is off the track, is Jimmy Johnson. Is like, yeah, Jimmy Johnson won a lot of races and won championships, but at the end of the day, nobody was like just diehard Jimmy Johnson. I know he had his fans and things of that nature, but I'm in all these different groups that sell diecast, they sell autograph stuff, Joe, and I'm telling you, Jimmy Johnson stuff just is not out there. It does not move the needle, and I think the same thing happens with William Byron. Yeah, he might be the driver this year. I said he'll win 5 races now after seeing what I've already seen, but you're right. We just watched 400 miles. We had drama almost the entire race from the second stage on. And then when William Byron ends up the one that comes into victory lane, I just went, we got to talk about this. And I promise you, Joe, when you scour YouTube tonight, when you scour all these different things, you know what the smallest thing will be? It'll be William Byron winning the race. They'll talk about Kyle Larson. They'll talk about Ross Chastain. They'll talk about Martin Truex Jr., who should have a tremendous race today and did not. Kyle Busch should have won this race. All he had to do was just get it into his pit stall and have a somewhat decent pit stop, and he would have won this race. But unfortunately, Kyle Busch versus the pit road had another incident again today. And even as us, as creators, as content drivers, we look at this and go, this is the worst possible outcome. When Ross Chastain last week did what he did, We had plenty to talk about. There's plenty of people that followed us. And now that William Byron sets the stage, Joe, I can guarantee you it's going to be crickets.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. And
Are you there, Joe? Not sure if Joe can see me or hear me yet. Just waiting on his internet to kick back. Obviously, if you're just now tuning in, internet has been an obvious issue this week. We've not been able to put out shorts due to it. We've not been able to drive content the way that we typically do because of that reason. And now I think we got him back.
yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. We are currently still live on YouTube. However, my feed is not keeps cutting out, and I think it's throwing me off our software here. So I'm just going to leave that down. We will get to your comments. If you do comment after the show, we're not going to be able to see them today, and we do apologize for that.
Okay.
So where were you at?
The last thing I was just talking about William Byron when it comes to moving the needle, driving content, driving, what we thought Twitter, especially social media content. Ross Chastain did that this past week. The finish at Kansas did this past week. But William Byron, I was just telling you, I just feel like is the ultimate like wet towel to NASCAR when it comes to just driving what the momentum that we had last week and even today, which what I thought was a really good race.
Yeah. And like I said, I can't disagree with you. Obviously, my feelings on William Byron, and it's a shame because I think he's probably a good kid. He's obviously a very talented race car driver. It's just, some people just don't take off with the fans. Like I've already mentioned Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson, yes. One of the most talented race car drivers, NASCAR drivers ever to race. Not liked by anybody. Very few Jimmy Johnson fans out there. And that's speaking volumes for a guy that's won 7 championships. So William Byron, the same way, obviously, with the way NASCAR set up, William Byron has no chance to win 7 championships. I think everybody could probably agree with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he will win a championship or two because he is a talented kid. I just don't think it drives the sport home. As far as what we saw on the racetrack today, I agree. We saw a very good race today. It came down to the last 8 laps. It was battle. And I thought stage 1 was pretty boring. I think I even sent you a text and said, this is boring. And stage 2 got a little bit better, but stage 3 was excellent racing. And, it's just kind of, like I said, it's just very anticlimactic when William Byron ends up winning the race.
Yeah. And Joe, and again, I'm not sure how much you heard this, but for the audience listening in, I've been diving hard into buying die cast, buying sheet metal, looking at the whole entire landscape of NASCAR recently. Joe, I can promise you that there are 25 or more die casts that come up to be moved or sold for every one William Byron that I've seen. Yeah. Every one Jimmy Johnson that I've seen. Because Dale Earnhardt, even in his death that has happened 22 years ago, still moves the needles for fans more so that I've seen more Ricky Rudd and Kenny Irwin stuff than I've seen Jimmy Johnson and William Byron. Kyle Busch stuff is still moving. All these different Ryan Blaney stuff, Chase Elliott stuff, all these different things are happening, moving around the sport and looking at social media. I'm sure Ross Chastain is going to be that driver here soon too. Just because his name keeps popping up, his name keeps getting into the minds of drivers. And yeah, sure, William Byron won the race. I think he's a talented kid. He's very young. I mean, he's still only 26 years old. But at the end of the day, when you saw the growth we had, the growth the social media had, we looked at the numbers from the Formula One race, Joe, and how god awful that race was compared to what we got at Kansas, compared to what we saw today, compared to the Miami Formula One race. All these things come together and say, please, for God's sakes, put us a victor in victory lane we can root before. I was praying Kevin Harvick somehow found a way to end the victory lane.
For Kevin.
And I'm not even a Kevin Harvick
Me
fan,
either.
but I'm like, please, in his last season, just put Kevin Harvick in victory lane. And when William Byron gets his third leading the entire NASCAR circuit victory, I'm sorry to say it, nobody gives a damn. And I wasn't that way. You have brought me to the dark side, if you want to call it that. I am with you, Joe. Nobody cares. That's not William Byron's fault, except for the fact that he's about as entertaining as a stick of gum. At the end of the day, it does the job, but nobody gets freaking excited for a stick of gum.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's kind of like Alex Bowman, which I can actually get behind Alex Bowman a little bit more, but
It's a little more of a personality.
a little bit more of a personality. But when you drive for Hendrick, and maybe both of us, and maybe NASCAR as a whole would feel different about William Byron if he was on, kind of a mediocre team and he was performing this well.
Yeah.
If and I don't want to call, Trackhouse Racing a mediocre team. I don't want to call 2311 a mediocre team, but if he was on one of these smaller teams and performing like this, I think people would get behind him. I think there's a moniker, when you're the 3 and 4 driver on Hendrick Motorsports, I think you kind of also get that moniker, that kind of idea that, well, you're only performing that well because of the equipment you're in as well. And it's I think the whole of NASCAR kind of feels like, well, William Byron, you're just handed these cars to be able to go out and do this. And now I don't think that's the case. I think he is a talented driver, but I don't think that helps his image at all. And at the end of the day, when you talk about Darlington and the history behind that track, NASCAR again this week, it could have drove home 2 weeks in a row and really had a winner and a champion that people could get behind. And it almost set it up kind of picturesque like for Kevin Harvick to win that race. And what better way for him to winning Darlington in his final season with the paint scheme that he was gonna intended to enter NASCAR with. So yeah, I think a lot of things could have went different for NASCAR as a whole. But at the end of the day, William Byron gets his third win, and again, nobody cares.
No, and I agree. And for you, audience, that are at least brave enough to click on a thumbnail and listen this far into it, I'm not speaking of you. This is for the people that, we're content drivers. We want NASCAR to elevate because it gives us a bigger audience. We grow the sport. It gets back to being the passionate thing that it was. And right now, when you have somebody like William Byron leading it, we saw the Jimmy Johnson years. That's when things started to go down because nobody cared. Kyle Busch was the villain that everybody loved to hate. And when Kyle Busch won, Joe, people talked about it because everybody loved to hate Kyle Busch. Ross Chastain is in that position. Last week, Ross Chastain didn't win. Do you know who won the race last week? Does anybody know who won the race last week? No. We know that Ross Chastain punched somebody in the fucking face, though. That's what we know. Nobody gives a shit that Denny Hamlin, who got booed today, won last week at Kansas. We just know Ross Chastain punched somebody in the face last week. That's all we know.
Yeah.
And Ross Chastain's going to be the talk this week, too.
Yeah, the most people that loosely follow NASCAR, or at least watch social media, that's what they knew out of that race last week, that Ross Chastain, punched Noah Gragson in the face. They even knew who Noah Gragson was. Yeah, that was the storyline behind last week's race. I don't think that's any secret to anybody.
Yeah, and but that thing, Joe, then went, I wonder what this NASCAR thing is all about. I've heard about it before. It's not as popular as it was. Let me look. Oh, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson had a great finish. That's pretty cool. The Xfinity race for the 1,000th time. Amazing finish with Kyle Larson and John Hunter Nemechek. And John Hunter Nemechek, after wrecking out of it, goes, that was racing. That was fun.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've seen that way too many times in the Xfinity series compared to the Cup series. Not saying that today was a bad race, but today's finish did not live up to what yesterday's finish was. And I would say today's Darlington, I would give it a 7 out of 10, or I would give it a green flag. I enjoyed it. I'm not at all disappointed that I watched it. But at the end of the day, Joe, it definitely would have been a white flag or a checkered flag, a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, if we were to able to get something, if anything, besides William Byron. And I know it just sounds like we're pounding on him and pounding on him and pounding on him.
It does.
but it's just the way it is. We want this sport to grow. We want this channel to grow. We want you as fans to be entertained. And like you said, if all 15 fans of William Byron are happy today, then that's not the right thing for NASCAR.
No, it's not. And excuse me, I still feel horrible about making fun of him at the beginning of the show, but yeah, and kind of to, stop harping on him. I think that, I think that probably most, hardcore NASCAR fans probably feel the same way that we do. And at the end of the day, we kind of got to look at the bright side. It was a good Darlington race. That final stage stage 3 was a great race. I'm still going to give this a green flag, as far as the race quality. I was a little skeptical there during the first stage, but yeah, it took off after that. And, watching the strategy game in the third stage really set it off for me, to see, the teams making their pit stops and how that was going to play out for them with tires. I mean, that is the quintessential Darlington race, and it played out well. I mean, other than obviously, your favorite driver there, Kyle Busch, made a big mistake. And then, my favorite driver, Kyle Larson, was again put out of a race by Ross Chastain for the third time this season. So other than that, great race. I didn't get to catch the Xfinity race yesterday. I was watching some IndyCar up in Indianapolis. Yeah. So good time up there. Was able to go up there. Actually,
where'd you sit, Joe?
The Northwest Terrace, right there in the turn 1 on the road course.
That's the best place to sit.
It is the best place to sit. And I'll tell you what, I got some tickets from a 2-time Indy 500 winner, and actually got to take a golf cart ride with Al Unser Jr.'s wife, who, well, I think it may have been an unattended golf cart ride. She came over and sat in the stands, and she was looking for a couple people. Her golf cart battery was running low, and she had to go back to the infield, and she was looking for a couple people to maybe push her golf cart in case it died. So I got volunteered for that, and it worked out well though, because that also came with some quality pit and garage passes that that got to get up close and personal. Scott Dixon decided to bump into me, gave me a little shoulder check, which I was cool with. And,
what a dick!
I know. Yeah. So I don't think he meant to. He was just walking. A lot of people down there.
That's true.
Governor Eric Holcomb told me to get out of his way. He's trying to talk to people. So I stuck a camera in his face and took a picture of him, which I sent you.
Yeah.
So it was a good time.
And you're not in jail, so you obviously did not do what I asked, but that's
right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But nonetheless, the Indy cars on that road course, kind of a boring race, obviously, but
I warned you.
Yeah, I knew that. I've never been to the road course up there, and I wanted to see it, so I wasn't gonna turn down the tickets.
Yes, please go to the NASCAR race. The NASCAR race last year was amazing, especially when your favorite driver, Kyle Larson, decides to spear Ty Dillon at 160 mile an hour at a 90-degree turn. So that was pretty fun.
And then his team said there was nothing wrong with his car, and then it came out that there was something wrong with his car, which made no sense. Why Hendrick was like, "There's nothing wrong with his car."
No. Alex Palou won yesterday, correct? I did watch that.
He did okay. By 20. No, it wasn't that much.
It's like 12 seconds.
It was like 12 seconds. Yeah. It was like, hey, there he goes.
And
hey, there's the next car.
There's second. Yeah. And he was in an Amish buggy, which was weird. Yeah. So yeah. No, I'm glad you had fun. I'm glad you enjoyed.
I did. It was a good time.
Yeah. So you did get, I know you followed the end of the Xfinity race.
I did.
But let's go ahead and let's jump into the final NASCAR standings, because there was some craziness that ended up happening. And let's see if we can get it to pull up. I think I might have clicked the wrong thing.
You did.
This is what happens when you're on a live show.
It does. You know what else happens when you're on a live show? Like one of the people on the show's internet will just cut out or mysteriously kick you off of, like, obviously we're doing this by Zoom, if you can't tell the giant Zoom emblem at the bottom right hand screen, but it happens.
So here we are. Joe, you can see this, correct?
I can.
Obviously William Byron finishes first. Kevin Harvick had a ton of damage on the front of his car. He said he had no chance of chasing him down. I predict Kevin Harvick to win this race. I got really, really giddy considering the fact that he was nowhere in the top 5 the entire race and then had a chance to start next to William Byron. Did not. Chase Elliott, a great run. RFK out of nowhere gets 2 drivers in the top 10. Bubba Wallace comes back from his pit crew letting him down. Harrison Burton comes out of nowhere and ends up in 6th. And what Joe and I, we had the throwback weekend. We had all the different cars on there. And I told everybody, I was like, this is my favorite paint scheme. He was able to get top 10 with that. Kyle Busch probably should have won this race. But again, Kyle Busch versus the pit road, and the pit road wins again because he made a rookie mistake and is unable to pit in his pit box. Justin Haley, I believe, was a lap down at one point, found his way back into 8th place. And then Ryan Blaney in 9th. Chris Buescher was also a lap down and got 10th. And here you are. Denny Hamlin was absolute dog shit because he hit the wall on turn 2. He hit the wall on turn 2 and was running like 16th to 20th the entire race and was terrible. Christopher Bell, his pit crew let him down by not being able to put a lug nut on the tire. And then really outside of that, Joe Logano got hit by Martin Truex. Kyle Larson, obviously we've talked about him just a little bit.
Ryan Newman spins himself out in his return.
Yes, he got himself in the spotlight. He qualified the best out of any Rick Ware racing car ever, only to then be a Rick Ware racing car and spin himself out.
That's not true, though. That's not true. I'm going to fact check NASCAR.
Okay.
Okay.
This is from the booth. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Bristol Dirt. I think they forget about J.J. Yeley.
Yes, you're exactly right. J.J. Yeley had a top 5, right?
He did. And so there. I just
shit NASCAR on Fox.
Yeah, that's terrible. Terrible information. You want real information, you come to Stuck in the Catch Fence. I heard that too, and I said that's wrong.
Well, being the unapologetic JJ Yeley fan, you would know that that's not wrong. And unfortunately, Joe, I was going to send this to you. I was watching the 2011. They had that last night, the Darlington 2011 race, which was a great race. It's amazing how much the car is different from now, especially when it comes to aero. JJ Yeley blew a engine like 30 laps in, which happened to be the second engine that he blew that weekend. He blew an engine in practice because if you're a Zoomer, they used to have 2-hour-long practices multiple times.
And made for a lot better racing.
Yes, and JJ Yeley had a practice cut short due to rain after 60 minutes of practice. And when he blew the engine, Joe, he goes, I guess I flipped the wrong switch. There's a lot of cooking in here.
That's kind of funny. Was JJ Yeley still with JGR then?
No, he was not. He was in a white 51 car, and I have no idea who that was for.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I guess that was his stint with JGR was a little bit before that, I believe.
Yeah, it was right before Denny Hamlin came into the sport.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the Cup Series.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I wish JJ Yeley, I'm hoping one day he gets that big win. He didn't even race today.
No, he did not.
Poor
Ryan
guy.
Newman gave him the boot.
I know.
And his own throwback.
I hope that's not a everyday thing. Or an every week thing.
I don't think it will. It won't be next week. I promise you that.
Yeah.
But, Joe, great segue. We're moving into next week. Next week, we obviously will be a lot less how do we put it? We don't really care as much next week. I mean, obviously it's cool because it's the All-Star race. It's going to be at North Wilkesboro. So I'm excited for that. Joe, they mentioned
track Bruton Smith just said, hey, let it die.
That's true. You, Bruton Smith, you piece of shit. So
he's dead.
Yeah. So what's he going to do? Comment back?
Yeah.
Did you know that YouTube copyrighted my video where I talked by myself in the video, Joe? I just wanted you to know that. Isn't that awesome? YouTube's great. So YouTube and Bruton Smith, both of you go dig a 6-foot hole. So anyway,
you had a video of yourself talking and it got copyrighted.
I got copyrighted. Like, what the do? I didn't sing. Not in that one. But no, North Wilkesboro, All-Star race next weekend. We get to kind of like tone it down a little bit. The only thing they're racing for is money. Joe, did you know this? I did not know this. Did you know the front stretch goes downhill and the back stretch goes uphill at North Wilkesboro?
I learned that today when they made the comment on during the race. Yes,
that is wild. And that's where I learned it too. That is wild. So moving to North Wilkesboro, just very, very briefly before we jump off air here, what are your expectations for the All-Star race? Are you able to simmer down a little bit, take it all in? And if it's a good enough product, do you think you will be able to go, if this puts on a good enough race, let's bring a cup point race to North Wilkesboro?
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing a points race at North Wilkesboro anyway. I mean, I think that's, obviously still a track that could host a race as far as the actual track. If you look at it, I don't know what the capacity is there now. I know that they've put a couple more seats in, but what is it, like 40,000?
Like Bengals training camp.
Yeah. So, which is probably why tickets are $600. But I think when you look at bringing tracks back, I mean, I'm not trying to be a homer, but I mean, I'm going to be very upset if North Wilkesboro gets a race back and Kentucky Speedway is still sitting here on the next ridge over, holding a bunch of Ford trucks for, why there's a perfectly repaved brand new track sitting over there that holds 100,000 people. And it was typically a great race. And so that'll upset me a little bit. I don't mind the All-Star race going to North Wilkesboro. I don't foresee them being able to do my favorite part of the All-Star race last year was the drags for qualifying. They are doing that. Yeah.
Yes, they are.
I honestly think that maybe that's just what they should do for qualifying anyway, because it is fun to watch.
That was bad. Joe, I would not disagree with you if we got to do drags for qualifying and then do a whole lap out and count the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome to me. I'm glad that they're doing the drags for qualifying. I really enjoyed that last year. We got to see one of the best races or wrecks at Charlotte. No, it was not at Charlotte. It was at Texas. But we got to see one of the better wrecks last year, and I forget who it was, but
it was Chris Buescher.
The flip on the infield, wheels came off, and that was the race that I learned that the wheels are actually tethered to the car.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Kind of like a Formula One car. Yeah. And we actually got to see Ryan Blaney in Victory Lane due to the All-Star race last year.
Right. But, North Wilkesboro, I don't, obviously I don't know what these cars are going to do. Obviously it's going to be short track racing. Typically, we haven't seen great short track racing with these next gen cars. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I hope everybody takes their mentality that Ross Chastain does on a weekly basis and puts it towards the All-Star race, and we get a good show. It'll be interesting to kind of like take a breath and be able to watch a race without it really mattering a lot, because it feels like every race, Joe, we're on the edge of our seat, and next week we technically don't have to do that. We just need to be entertained. And if you're wanting, we'll see. We'll probably talk in midweek whether or not we'll do a post-race recap. If it's a horrible event that starts at 8:00, may not come to you live at midnight to say, hey, that was bad.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And I could tell you, if Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, or probably Ross Chastain wins again.
Yeah. So, Joe, we are finished with Darlington. We're looking forward to the All-Star. I think we pretty close to the middle of the season. Not there yet, but pretty close. Do you have any final words for the Lady in Black and what we saw tonight?
No, great race. Not to harp on what we talked about all show. I think NASCAR could have had a better outcome, but all in all, great race, really.
Yes, I agree. Darlington, again, one of the oldest tracks in NASCAR, but still one of the best in my opinions. Can't wait. I've already let my family know we are going there next year. So thank you for tuning in to Stuck in the Catch Fence. From internet problems aside, and from also just the fact that you had to watch William Byron win a race. I mean, it could be worse. So, I mean, that's going to be it for us. I'm Ryan Peters. To my left, my
It's
left,
one of these. It's
my
one of
left,
these.
my
Yeah,
left. To my left is Joe
Yeah.
Spillman.
Tickle the subscribe button.
Tickle the subscribe button. Hit the like button. We'll be back in the middle of the week. We're done.